Welcome to Bible Time. We're doing the daily Bible reading for Believers Fellowship, and I'm excited because today we start a new book. Today we start First Kings, and the book is just like what it says. It's going to be the history of the kings of Israel, but you can divide the book pretty easily into two parts. It's the kingdom united, first 11 chapters under Solomon as king. Then after Solomon, it's kingdom divided. Chapters 12 through 22, there's a northern kingdom known as Israel. There's a southern kingdom known as Judah. And kind of the main characters that you're going to see in the book of First Kings is obviously Solomon, the king of Israel, and the things that he does, and Elijah the prophet. I'm looking forward to the times we get to consider Elijah the prophet. And you can see, I mean, if you wanted to pull out a theme for this book, you could do a play off of an old phrase, and you could call it faithful we stand, divided we fall. You're going to see that the division is just another step in them falling away from the Lord, rejecting the Lord, and ultimately being rejected by God. Now, the book starts off with David is about to die, and so Adonijah, who's probably the next in line, his older brothers have died, and so Adonijah, son number 4, is thinking he's next up, and that he's going to be the next king. And so he exalts himself, and the idea there is that was an ongoing thing. He's an opportunist. He sees the opportunity coming, and he's going to take it. He's going to promote himself. This is unilateral self-promotion. He's decided, I'm going to be the king. And, you see that one of the problems here with Adonijah, you see it in verse 6, it says that David never really disciplined him. David was consistently negligent in the care of his children. And as we saw in 2 Samuel, that was part of the troubles related to his family because of his own sin and his own negligence in his own family. Well, David apparently had previously promised, or it was previously known, that Solomon was going to be the next king. If you read 1 Chronicles, chapter 22, verses 9 and 10, you'll see that. So he had previously stated, it was known that Solomon was to be the next king. And so into the picture comes Bathsheba at the prodding of Nathan the prophet to go and talk to David and say, hey, do you know what Adonijah's doing? And isn't Solomon supposed to be the next king? And really, this is the only time you see Bathsheba in the account outside of the sin with David of 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. But she really saves Israel from a disaster at this critical moment in their history. And so David confers, yes, Solomon's going to be the next king, and he makes arrangements for him to be anointed as the king. And you'll notice in verse 35 that he's going to become the ruler over Israel and over Judah. So see, even there you're starting to see the signs of a separation. It's Israel and it's Judah. And David reigned over Israel and Judah. And now Solomon's going to reign over Israel and Judah, but then eventually it's going to be divided, Israel and Judah. And so they take him down. They have Zadok the priest go down with Solomon to the Gihon spring, and that's where he gets anointed as the next king. And if you go on a tour of Israel, you'll go into the old city of David. You'll take a trail that eventually takes you down to Hezekiah's tunnel. And along the way, you'll come to the spot where the Gihon spring is. And there'll be some kind of a marker there indicating that this is the place where Solomon was anointed as the king. And so that's a historic spot to take note of on that tour. And so he's anointed there, all the right things. He's riding David's mule. The trumpet is blown. The priest is there. It's all happening for Solomon And then when Nigel finds out, Dad made Solomon the king, he recognizes that he's in trouble, and he goes and he grabs the horns of the altar, the altar where sacrifices would be made. They'd have horns on each corner, and he goes and grabs the horns of the altar. This is from Exodus chapter 21. That was a way of seeking asylum. He's seeking asylum there for his crime of usurping the kingdom there, and he wants safety. He wants safety at this point, but we're going to see as we go further into the book, he doesn't want to submit to what's going on. And so here is how we see how Solomon becomes the king over Israel, and he's going to begin a historic rule over the nation. And this is the transition from David to Solomon. And you can see that this is, again, especially if you look at the cross-reference in 1 Chronicles 22, 9 and 10, this is according to God's covenant. David's going to have a son. The son's name is going to be Solomon. Solomon's going to build me a temple. And that's all a part of the covenant that God made with David. So God, again, is, even though Solomon and David are main characters here, the real story focuses on God and what God is doing in fulfilling his covenant and preserving these people and preserving this line to bring the promised Savior into the world. And I just hope that this will increase our appreciation for what God has done for us and increase our appreciation for Christ coming into the world and what he's done for us, that we would never take that for granted. And we're going to continue this story tomorrow on More Bible Time.